August 2006, a woman named Catherine Yu received an important phone call from her husband, Robert Wone, who told her he had just left an important seminar and would be spending the evening with friends. However, minutes after midnight, Catherine received a troubling call from Joseph Price, one of Robert's friends, who told her that her husband was dead. This case is one of the strangest, most enigmatic and mysterious criminal episodes of recent years, and what happened that night remains shrouded in mystery and doubt. Welcome once again to another episode of Urban Crime Stories. Today we are going to learn about the case of the strange and mysterious death of Robert Wone. So, let's get started. Friends are one of life's most precious and valuable safe havens. Having solid friendships to lean on offers numerous health benefits, and countless sages and scholars of all ages, from ancient Greece to the present day, have spoken of the beauty of having friends to confide in. There are times, however, when those same friends become our greatest danger. Robert Wone, a young lawyer, died under strange circumstances in August of 2006, in the midst of one of the most baffling cases in history. It happened while he was spending the night with three close friends: Joseph Price, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward. What happened the night Robert Wone died? Let's take a deeper dive. Robert Eric Wone, born June 1st, 1974, was living a full and satisfying life. He was married to the woman he loved, had a rewarding job and a sense of purpose in his life. At the time of his death, he was only 32 years old and had a lot of life ahead of him. He attended Xaverian High School in Brooklyn and attended the College of William and Mary in Virginia. In 1996, he graduated with honors and earned his law degree from the University of Pennsylvania. During a legal conference, he met Catherine Yu, an excellent lawyer, whom he married on June 7, 2003. They had a solid marriage, loved each other deeply, and had no financial problems. However, starting in 2006, things began to go awry. Robert Wone was a friendly person and active in supporting the Asian American community. He was involved with the Organization of Chinese Americans and the Asian Pacific American Bar Association. 2 months before his death, he ran for a position on the board of directors of Radio Free Asia, an American nonprofit organization dedicated to providing information and uncensored news to members of Asia's most vulnerable communities. His wife Catherine supported his decision. Robert easily passed the interviews and got his new job. On August 2, 2006, he arranged to travel to Washington, D.C. to attend a legal seminar. After the seminar, he planned to go to the Radio Free Asia office and report to the second shift supervisor. After calling his wife, they both decided that it would be better and more comfortable for him to stay overnight in Washington, so that he could return home the next day by public transportation. This small decision changed Robert's luck forever when he decided to stay with his old friend and college roommate, Joseph Price. Joseph Price, a lawyer who Robert met during his time at the College of William and Mary, was also supportive of his community. After graduation, Price had become president of the Gay and Lesbian Alumni Association and was part of Errant Fox, LLP in Washington, D.C. Price was in a polyamorous relationship with Victor Zaborski, his primary partner, and Dylan Ward. The three lived together in a house on the edge of DuPont Circle and were longtime acquaintances of Robert and Catherine. Robert's 30th birthday in June of 2004 was celebrated at Price's house, and both Price and Victor Zaborski, his partner, were guests at Robert and Catherine's wedding. Just 6 minutes after midnight, Catherine received an important phone call. It was Joe Price who said these exact words to her. "Kathy, I can't believe I'm calling you. Robert's in George Washington Hospital. He's been stabbed in the back." Worried about her husband, Catherine and her brother drove from Virginia to Washington, D.C. But by the time she arrived at the hospital, it was too late. Robert had already been pronounced dead. But beyond the pain of loss, Catherine would notice the first of a long series of inconsistencies between the testimony of Robert's friends and the evidence. And that was, the stab wound that had ended Robert's life was not in his back, but in his stomach. On the night of August 2nd at 11:49 p.m., Washington Metropolitan Police Dispatch received a desperate call from Victor Zaborski, Price's primary partner, who reported that an intruder had entered the home and stabbed a friend who was asleep. Zaborski quickly responded to the operator's questions and admitted that Robert Wone was bleeding in the stomach and that Joe Price, Victor's partner, was lying next to him on the second floor. The operator provided clear instructions to Victor on how to care for Robert while the paramedics were on their way to the scene. However, just 5 minutes after the call, when the paramedics arrived at the house, they were met with a bizarre and disturbing scene. This happened while the 911 call was still in progress. The place where Robert Wone met his death was a strange and unusual scenario. The call implied that it was an emergency, and that it was vital to act quickly to save the victim's life. But nothing inside the house seemed to correspond to the place where a dying man would be found. Victor Zaborski, the only person concerned or distressed about Robert, was wearing a white plush robe. Inside the house there was a strange serenity, with no screaming or signs of something that could be associated with the chaos of such a situation. The paramedics came upon Dylan Ward, who was coming out of the second-floor bathroom fully showered, calm, and in an impeccable bathrobe, as if nothing urgent was going on. The paramedics found Robert Wone lying limp in the middle of a sofa bed, dead for some time. They noticed that there was no sign of anyone trying to place a towel on his wounds. Joseph Price appeared in the same room in his underwear and sitting on the bed with his back to the door. When asked what was going on, Price simply replied that he had heard a scream. The paramedics examined Robert's body while keeping an eye on Price, whose behavior was strange and bizarre. Upon examining Robert's body, they found that his t-shirt had 3 puncture wounds in the front, with his head lying on a pillow, his arms at his sides, and a small knife with a subtle blood mark on the blade, which was the suspected murder weapon. In a maximum of 2 hours, Robert Wone had entered that house never to come out alive. The Metropolitan Police showed up at the scene of Robert Wone's death and found signs that it was not normal. The guest room was clean and tidy. There were no signs of a struggle, and the victim's work clothes and belongings were neatly laid out on the nightstand. The body had 3 deep incisions on the abdomen and several wounds on the chest, but it was practically free of blood. The alleged murder weapon was found to have come from a knife set in the kitchen, but the blade was too long and had hardly any traces of blood or other samples to indicate that it had been used against Robert Wone. Joseph Price, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward was identified as the prime suspects in the death of Robert Wone. They were soon taken to the police station and questioned separately, looking for any inconsistencies in their statements. However, this did not work. During their interrogation, all 3 told the same bizarre and absurd story. According to all 3, Robert Wone arrived at the house around 10:30 p.m., and Victor Zaborski was in bed watching a television program. Joseph Price and Dylan Ward were in the kitchen, where they greeted him and escorted him to the guest room on the second floor, which turned out to be the same place where his body was found less than 2 hours later. All 3 claimed to have heard an alarm system that beeped every time one of the windows or doors leading to the outside was opened, although they thought it was Sarah Morgan, a neighbor Price trusted. Later, Price and Zaborski heard screaming and moaning, and when they went downstairs to see what had happened, they found the door to the guest room ajar. The most important details in this story are that Price claimed to have found a knife in Robert's belly, which he had taken out and placed on the bedside table. He also stated that if they did not find the DNA of the real murderer, it was because he must have been wearing gloves. Zaborski confirmed Price's story verbatim, using virtually the same words. They also believed the alleged burglar or murderer had entered through the back door, despite signs of cobwebs and dust being found on that door. At the time, trained dogs were brought in to search for evidence, but they made little headway, having only guided them to a dryer on the second floor and an outside drain. Clearly, evidence had been erased at these locations. But the strangest and most disturbing fact was yet to come. Aside from this detail, it was revealed that Robert's cause of death was asphyxiation, as a ruptured blood vessel was found in his eye. The case became stranger and stranger, as everything seemed to indicate that Robert had been sexually assaulted prior to his death. When they analyzed his cavities, traces of semen were indeed found, but just when it seemed the situation could not get any stranger, lab tests revealed that the semen belonged to Robert himself. Either way, everything seemed to indicate that Robert had been tied up, sexually assaulted, and then stabbed to death. Despite the profound inconsistencies in their stories, the truth is that the police had no conclusive evidence against any of the accused 3 suspects, and after a few days they stopped answering questions and giving statements at the direction of their lawyers. The strangest and most sickening part of the whole case, however, is that days after Robert's death, the 3 men all went to the home of Robert's widow, Catherine, to pay their respects and cried with her. At the time, the woman had no inkling that these men were the prime suspects in her husband's death, so she asked Price to be one of her husband's pallbearers on the day of the funeral. He agreed, and on the day the body was carried to his funeral, Joe Price was one of those who carried on his shoulders the coffin that would carry Robert Wone to his final resting place. Within a year of Robert's death, after learning that her late husband's friends were the suspects in his death, and that forensic evidence showed that these three men had cleaned up and tampered with the crime scene, Catherine filed a $20 million lawsuit against them for not only spending the last moments of her husband's life without saving him, but also for their attempts to cover up the crime. In October of 2008, Dylan Ward was charged with obstruction of justice, and in November of 2008, both Joseph Price and Victor Zaborski was also charged with obstruction of justice. All three men were later released pending trial and subject to electronic monitoring and curfew. Later, the electronic monitoring and curfew restrictions ended, but prosecutors announced that charges related to tampering with evidence could be filed in the future. It is important to note the appearance of another enigmatic figure at the scene. His name was Michael Price, brother of Joseph Price, and unlike Joseph, Michael was a consummate troublemaker. 3 months after Robert's death, he surreptitiously entered his brother Joseph's apartment and stole some of his belongings, totaling over $7,000. Michael, along with an accomplice named Phelps Collins, were charged with burglary, but those charges were later dropped. Authorities announced that in 2006, that they had been preparing to make an arrest in the Wone murder case, but the burglary had derailed their plans. The case of Robert Wone is a mystery that remains unsolved. Suspicion hung over 3 men who had tampered with the crime scene where Robert Wone had died, but there was no conclusive evidence that they were responsible. Until this day, there are many theories of what happened to Robert Wone on the night of August 2, 2006. The residence where Robert Wone was murdered was sold for nearly $1.5 million in June of 2011. The 3 men who were suspects have since been residing in Florida. Catherine Wone settled her $20 million lawsuit against the 3 suspects in August of 2011, saying that she wanted to move on and spend the next 40 years of her life focusing on the good. If you enjoyed this case and want more stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more upcoming episodes. Until next time, I'll see you with another episode of Urban Crime Stories.